It was supposed to be just another quiet morning in the gated community of Willow Heights' neatly trimmed hedges, slow-moving golf carts, and an HOA that prided itself on control. But everything changed the moment a 911 call went out from one of the homes. A man inside was having a severe medical emergency. Time was ticking. The paramedics were dispatched immediately. What happened next would leave the entire neighborhood shaken, and the HOA board scrambling to explain. When the ambulance arrived at the front gate, the on-duty HOA security guard refused to lift the barrier. He claimed the paramedics didn't have clearance to enter. Despite the lights flashing and sirens wailing, he insisted on protocol. Minutes passed. The medics, growing desperate, made the call to proceed anyway. That's when the situation escalated. The security guard, acting on what he claimed was his authority, drew his taser. And in front of stunned residents, he used a licensed paramedic right there at the community gate. By the time another team reached the patient's home, it was too late. The man didn't make it. And now his grieving family has filed a lawsuit not only against the HOA guard, but the entire board. The incident has sparked outrage, media attention, and raised serious questions about private security powers, HOA overreach, and the cost of delay in emergencies. Residents are divided. Some support the guard's decision to follow rules, while others are furious that red tape may have cost a man his life. The board remains mostly silent. Lawyers now speak for them. As more details come to light, new secrets about the HOA's past choices begin to surface. But the biggest shock may still be ahead, because one of the board members might have had a personal stake in keeping that ambulance out. Willow Heights wasn't just any neighborhood. It was a place where rules were treated like gospel. Residents signed strict agreements, the kind that dictated lawn lengths, driveway decor, and even the color of curtains facing the street. The HOA board ran things tightly, and the guards were expected to enforce every guideline without question. But no one ever imagined that blind loyalty to protocol could come at such a devastating price. The guard in question, Mark Delaney, was a retired corrections officer known for taking his job a bit too seriously. He'd been hired by the HOA just 6 months earlier and had quickly earned a reputation for being strict even with residents. Some said he meant well. Others whispered he was on a power trip. But until that morning, no one thought he'd actually act on impulse against emergency personnel. The paramedic who was tasered, Luis Hernandez, had been with the city for over a decade. He'd responded to heart attacks, strokes, and car crashes, but never had he been stopped from doing his job like this. According to reports, Luis tried reasoning with Delaney for nearly 2 full minutes before moving past the gate. When Delaney fired, a small crowd of neighbors watched it happen from their porches, some recording with their phones, stunned to intervene. And the patient, David Rourke, a 62-year-old veteran and longtime Willow Heights resident, lay alone inside his home, waiting for help that would never arrive in time. He'd lived in the community for over 15 years and even served on the HOA board himself years ago. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew him. Now, as the lawsuit unfolds, questions are piling up. Why didn't the HOA have emergency protocols for first responders? Why didn't anyone on the board step in sooner? And why does one board member seem unusually nervous every time David's name is mentioned? In the days that followed, Willow Heights turned from a quiet, gated community into the center of media chaos. News vans parked outside the gates, reporters camped out near the clubhouse, and residents, some of whom hadn't spoken to each other in years, were suddenly whispering in driveways and texting late into the night. Everyone had an opinion about what happened, but no one had answers. And that made the silence from the HOA board feel even heavier. Behind closed doors, the board was in full damage control. Legal counsel advised them not to speak publicly, But one board member, Lon Whitaker, wasn't comfortable staying quiet. She had known David Rourke personally. He'd helped her fix her roof years ago and had once stood up for her during a dispute with another board member. Now, his death felt like more than just a tragedy. It felt like a betrayal of everything the community claimed to stand for. Meanwhile, residents started digging into the HOA's past policies. Some noticed that emergency access had been brought up before during a board meeting months earlier. A concerned homeowner had asked what the procedure was if a fire truck or ambulance needed to get in fast. At the time, the board president, Gerald Knox, had brushed it off. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there," he'd said. Now that bridge was burning, and his leadership was under fire. To make things worse, someone leaked an old internal email chain showing that the board had debated installing a remote gate override system for emergencies, but voted it down, citing cost and potential misuse. That decision was now front and center in the lawsuit, with the victim's family arguing it directly contributed to David's death. And then there was the quiet rumor going around. A few neighbors believed David had been about to expose something that certain board members didn't want public. The details were unclear, but the tension was rising. Because if that rumor was true, the tasering might not have just been about trespassing. It might have been about silencing him. To dot as pressure mounted, the board couldn't keep hiding behind legal statements. Protest signs began appearing outside the HOA office. Justice for David. Emergency access now. The community, once so orderly and quiet, was now fractured. Tensions boiled at a special town hall meeting held at the clubhouse where residents demanded accountability. Gerald Knox, usually calm and polished, looked rattled for the first time as people hurled questions faster than he could answer. But one question cut deeper than the rest. Why had David been calling city officials just weeks before his death? Ellen had been quietly doing her own digging. Late at night, she sifted through old emails, minutes from past board meetings, and even David's social media posts. One thread caught her attention. David had been vocal about misused HOA funds, claiming there were budget irregularities tied to security upgrades that never happened. He hinted that certain board members were funneling money toward private contractors connected to them. That included the same firm that hired Mark Delaney, the guard who fired the taser. As Ellen pressed deeper, she found something strange: an invoice for emergency response upgrades that was approved, paid, and never implemented. The vendor's address, a P.O. box in another state. She wasn't ready to accuse anyone, but the pattern was too hard to ignore. And when she brought it up quietly to another board member, he told her to drop it. "It's not worth the trouble," he said with a nervous glance. "People get hurt over this kind of stuff." At the same time, Luis Hernandez, the paramedic, was finally ready to speak out. In an emotional interview, he described the moments leading up to the tasering. How he saw the panic in David's eyes through the window and how helpless he felt. His words struck a nerve, but they also revealed something new. Luis mentioned that as he approached the house, David was on the phone, seemed to be recording something. That recording has never been found. And now, everyone is wondering, what was David trying to document before he died? And who wanted to make sure that recording never surfaced? 2 weeks after Luce's interview aired, a quiet sense of unease settled over Willow Heights. The HOA board stayed out of sight. Ellen stopped answering calls, and even the usually bold protesters seemed to pull back. Something had shifted. But then, just when things seemed like they might calm down, a new twist reignited everything, and it came from a place no one expected. David's niece, Marissa Rourke, flew in from out of state to attend a memorial vigil held in front of his home. She hadn't seen her uncle in years, but in the days leading up to his death, he'd left her a string of strange voicemails, cryptic messages, warning her to keep the file safe and trust no one inside the HOA. At first, she thought it was just David being paranoid. But now, with everything unraveling in the community, those messages felt more like a warning. After the vigil, Marissa went through David's belongings with a small group of neighbors who had come to support. In the back of his closet, behind old coats and a broken vacuum cleaner, she found a locked, fireproof box. No key, no code. But inside, stuffed into the lining, was a flash drive taped under the fabric. She didn't say a word that night, just slipped it into her pocket and left. The next morning, she took it to a friend of hers, a tech specialist, and what they found made her blood run cold. The drive contained audio files. Not just one recording, but several, including one from the morning of David's death. In it, David could be heard arguing with someone. The voice was muffled at first, but then clear. It was Gerald Knox. They weren't arguing about a late fee or neighbor dispute. They were fighting about missing HOA funds and a cover-up involving security contracts. But before Marissa could take the evidence to authorities, her hotel room was broken into. Nothing stolen except the flash drive. Now, with the only known copy gone and no one willing to admit what was really going on, she finds herself caught in something far bigger than she ever imagined. And the one person she hoped she could trust may be hiding more than... The break-in changed everything. Marissa, scared but determined, went straight to Ellen and told her everything about the voicemails, the flash drive, and the voice on the recordings. Ellen's face went pale. She didn't ask for proof. She just nodded, like she already knew what Marissa had found. That night, Ellen made a decision that would either take everything down or destroy what was left of her peace. She called a private press conference the next morning, held right outside the HOA office. Reporters gathered fast. Standing beside Marissa, Ellen didn't hold back. She laid out everything: how the board had ignored multiple warnings about emergency access, how money meant for community safety was funneled into shady contracts, and how David Rourke had been trying to blow the whistle before he died. She admitted to voting against the gate override system and said she regretted it every single day. But the biggest blow came when she named Gerald Knox directly, accusing him of threatening David and orchestrating a cover dash up. Just hours later, Knox was taken into custody by local police on charges related to financial fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy. The investigation moved quickly now that the story was out in the open. But the biggest surprise came from Luis Hernandez, the paramedic. During a final interview, he revealed he had backed up his bodycam footage from that morning, even though official channels had claimed no footage existed. On it was not just the confrontation at the gate, but also the moment he entered the house after backup arrived. The camera had caught a blinking red light on David's phone. It was still recording, and in that final minute of audio, as David lay struggling to breathe, he whispered something chilling. "If anything happens to me, check the garden shed." Police raided David's property again. Hidden beneath loose floorboards in the shed, they found a second flash drive, this one with full video evidence of his last conversations with Gerald. Documents, bank transfers, and more. Everything the first drive had. And more. But just as the case seemed closed, authorities discovered something else buried in those files: a payment made to a second guard, one who hadn't even been scheduled to work that day. And now, a new question hangs in the air. Was Delaney acting alone? Or was someone else still pulling strings from the shadows? In the weeks that followed the final discovery, Willow Heights changed. Gerald Knox faced a formal indictment, and the second guard tied to the off-schedule payment was identified and brought in for questioning. It turned out he had been stationed nearby, listening in through a walkie system, ready to intervene, but never did. Investigators confirmed that while Delaney did fire the taser, it was part of a larger effort to keep David from speaking out. The truth was uglier than anyone expected. Misused HOA funds, intimidation, and calculated silence. The HOA board dissolved under community pressure. A new temporary committee was put in place with residents voting for full transparency and sweeping. Reforms, emergency access policies were finally updated with remote override gates installed across all entries. Ellen stepped down but continued to support the legal process, helping families understand how deep the damage went. Marissa, although heartbroken, stayed in town a little longer to testify, and later worked with local reporters to publish a full account of her uncle's story. Luis returned to work but carried the emotional scars. He spoke publicly at a town forum, reminding everyone that behind policies and positions, real lives are at stake. David Rourke became a symbol not just of injustice, but of accountability. The HOA Paramedic Taser incident was covered nationwide, sparking discussions about private security powers, gated communities, and the legal responsibilities of homeowners associations. By the end, residents of Willow Heights no longer saw their gates as symbols of safety, but as reminders of what happens when rules matter more than people. David's shed was cleaned out and turned into a small memorial garden-y quiet space, open to anyone, marked by a simple plaque that read, "Speak, even when they try to silence you."